Welcome to another session of our Tamking International Talks. I'm here to present you two of our most anticipated presenters. The first one being Ms. Chandran Kanchana and Dr. Sanath Sukamaran. Now, I would love to welcome all those that have joined us from everywhere, and more so to incite you to pay attention, also be attentive, take notes, and be ready to ask questions when we reach that section. At this point in time, I'm going to hand over the introductions to Ms. Chandran Kanchana, and on to you.
Can you all hear me?
Yeah, can get you.
Good day, everyone, and a very warm welcome to Tamkin International Talks. On behalf of the organizing team, thank you for joining us today for this session titled Sustainable Tools and Techniques for Resilience Amidst VUCA and AI. Now, we are delighted to have such a diverse group of participants. Please note that this is a 60-minute session designed as an awareness and exploratory conversation around resilience and mental agility in today's rapidly evolving world shaped by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, and of course, not forgetting artificial intelligence. Now, while we may not cover everything in depth, our aim is to spark insight, reflection, and practical thinking. Now, we strongly encourage active participation as this session is highly interactive. Your engagement, reflections, and questions will enrich the collective learning experience. Now, there will be a dedicated question and answer segment at the end, but if any pressing questions arise during the session, please feel free to post them in the chat and we will address them where appropriate. I am Ms. Kanchana Chandran, founding member and chapter lead of Playbook, a certified knowledge management professional, a dual qualified lawyer, both in Malaysia as well as England and Wales, as well as an educator and industry practitioner at the Center for Commercial Law and Justice, Sunway University. And my co-speaker today is Dr. Sanath Sukamaran, workplace development consultant, managing director and co-founder of Agile Consultancy. With that, it is my pleasure now to hand over the session to Dr. Sanath Sukamaran, who will be guiding us through today's conversation. I encourage everyone to stay fully engaged and look forward to a meaningful and fruitful session together. Over to you, Dr. Sanath.
All right. Thank you very much. A very good day to all our attendees today. And I just want to do a quick check if I'm coming out okay.
Loud and clear.
Okay, so allow me to share my screen. Checking with the organizers, do I have the option to share screen right now? All right. Coming up in a moment. All right, so just checking if it's all up and clear in your screen.
Yeah,
and
it's
I'm
up and clear.
heard clearly. Excellent. Thank you so much for that feedback. So, as mentioned by my co-speaker, co-presenter Kanchana Chandran, we are very delighted to be here today to share with all of you a very interesting topic on sustainable tools and techniques for resilience amidst VUCA and AI. That's a mouthful, I agree, right? So let's try and decipher this seemingly huge topic into something that we can all take back and relate in our day-to-day lives. So let me start with a sort of a survey that was done some time back. Resilience is needed to effectively manage complexity and thrive in a VUCA and AI environment. So there you go, you have this word resilience, you've got complexity bit that resilience addresses, and then how that all comes together in VUCA and AI. And what more, the survey also tells us that highly resilient people are 28% more adaptable to changing circumstances. And There are loads of circumstances that are now changing now because of AI and VUCA, right? Would you agree with me? So, well, I don't want this session to be a one-way kind of thing. So feel free to share your thoughts on the chat. We will be monitoring the chat from time to time. There will be questions at the end. Yes, we have the formal session, but if there is any burning question, feel free to put them on the chat, right? I think we have an active chat here, and my co-presenter will inform me if there are any burning questions that you have, right? Are we okay? Can we just see a quick okay on the chat? Are we okay with that? Can we see some thumbs up or okay? Okay, brilliant. We've got some responses now. Absolutely. So, yep, I know it's a Friday, so so let's get going with those comments. Yeah, right. Let's get going now. So again, on this topics of resilience and agility, because that's where we are talking about, right? There's this whole term called multiplied effect. You know, you can call it like a compound effect. When resilience and agility come together, they will multiply effect on business outcomes. And that's why we are here today, right? Whether it's your personal business, whether it's your enterprise business, whether it's your own career, you need these two large components, resilience and agility. And we also got this term called burnout, right? I think burnout is a term that's used in Morocco or even in any part of the world. And if you got people who are resilient and agility combined, you reduce the scores of burnout as much as 71%. So, ladies and gentlemen, in this call today, if you're seeing this very important point, it's not so much how much work I'm doing at the moment that causes burnout, but it's my ability to be resilient and agile that affects my burnout, right? If that's quite a bit of a statement, let me just make it simpler. It's not how much work I do that causes burnout, it's my inner ability to be resilient and agile that actually decides whether I'm going to experience burnout or not. Okay? That's a profound statement for you. So let's talk about this a bit more, because this word resilient is so much used today in my session. So let's just decipher this a bit more. So this session, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what are the tools and techniques that we're going to incorporate to increase resilience, and in that process, manage the turbulence that's caused in VUCA and AI. I'll talk about VUCA a bit later. What is that statement? What is that jargon? I will talk about that. But for now, we are talking about this one word resilience, right? This one word resilience. So I would like to ask a question, and I would like you to just probably share your thoughts on the chat. And right now, if you can just get into your keyboard, if you just tell me, why is resilience important to you and me, just me? Why is resilience important to me? It's just be a one statement, if that's all right. Right? I've not gone into so much about resilience yet, but whatever that comes to your mind, why is resilience important to me? I'm just watching the chat now. Could you just put your thoughts? If it's just a word, that's fine. Just want to see if we can connect to the session. Am I making sense? So far, at least. It's a lot more to go. Coming up. Why is resilience important to me? That's a question. Counting on ones. I know you're thinking it's a big one for you, for some of you here today. Whatever comes to your mind. We can even have our host share your thoughts. That's absolutely fine. Why is resilience important to me? So get on the chat, share your thoughts. Why is resilience important to me? So if it's a mouthful for you, hang in there. It's not my intention to have a burnout session by asking you questions here. So let me get on to the next slide. And if it comes to you, then feel free to get onto the chat, yeah? Now have a look at this sketch. It got this guy, the interviewer, asking the interviewee if he is resilient or not. Now guess what he's doing is flipping himself and showing how agile he is. Now, well, he may be very agile, but as funny as it may seem, resilience is an aspect of your mind, right? It's your mental state. It's not your physical state. So resilience is an internal state if you are able to withstand the external turmoil. So, well, some of you might tell me, well, Sanath, you know what? I think I'm resilient if I can manage my spouse. Wow, okay. Some of you might tell me, you know what? I think I'm a resilient if I can manage my children. They're just so handful of them, just can't manage them. I'm doing quite well. I must be resilient. And some of you might say, well, I've got colleagues of mine with all sort of characters. I think I can manage them. I must be resilient. Or some of you might even tell me, you know what? I've got a boss that I'm able to manage him all these years. I better be resilient. Well, jokes aside, I guess you are. But surely the word resilience is going to take on a different meaning now that we are in VUCA and AI. So, well, nice and good. Manage your family, your children, your spouse, your bosses. But in the age of VUCA and AI, how is this becoming more important than ever? Now let's explain this term VUCA. What is this VUCA? What's this big jargon all about? V stands for the volatility. It just means to change. Things are changing just so rampant, so rapid. And then we got the U, the uncertainty. It's just lack of direction, right? I just don't know where things are at the moment. Just being so unclear. And to see the complexity, there's so many dimensions, so many factors involved. I just can't see the connection. I can't pinpoint how things are connected. And the A, the ambiguity, the lack of clarity, the lack of meaning. And because of that, I just can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. So put up all of this together, ladies and gentlemen, and now you add AI. Wow. You've already got VUCA to manage, and now with AI, VUCA is going to take on a different dimension. You agree with me? And I just check on the, you can say no. If it's a yes, it's a yes. If it's no, it's a no. That's fine. Absolutely fine. So, oh, I see some responses now on the chat. Excellent. Keep coming. Yeah, keep coming. So the more you engage, the more you learn, right? Excellent. Keep coming. So the next question I have is this. Am I already experiencing VUCA at home or at my workplace? Am I already experiencing this? Some of you might say yes. Some of you might say not quite. It's a question for you on the chat. Go ahead, get onto the chat and tell me, yes, I think, Sanath, I am already seeing this happening with AI, with a lot of changes in my workplace, with some restructuring of our organization, with changes of my leadership, my bosses now expecting much more than they did before. Yes, I am experiencing VUCA, right? So I believe that's mostly a yes. Now, here comes a bit more of a frightening statement. Okay, what does the survey tell us? According to the World Economic Forum, by 2030, AI will have replaced or displaced 92 million jobs, but interestingly, created 170 million new jobs. Now the question is, am I in the 92 million or am I in that 170 million? So it's not a question of whether am I losing my job. It's more a question of me losing a job to someone who have used AI and because I did not. So that's the statement, right? So the question is, am I now resilient? Am I able to use the techniques and tools that I'm going to share right now to be able to boost my resilience and embrace VUCA and AI? So that's the question. So I'm going on to the next bit of my session now, talking about sustainable tools and techniques. But before I move on, I'm just going to pause a moment and just check if Am I going okay? Am I too fast? Is my speed okay? Maybe Eloyd, if you can just let me know if I'm doing okay.
I think you're doing fine. The speed is fine.
All right, that's great. So thank you, everyone. And I'm, you know what, back home in Malaysia, I'm known as the agile guy. So I'm very, very comfortable in being disrupted halfway through my session. So feel free to, you know, share your thoughts on the chat. So I'm very happy to take your questions. So coming back to this again, right? We're talking about sustainable tools and techniques. And to put it in a nutshell, it means nothing but my mental agility. And we've got a new term here, psychological capital. Wow. We've heard of intellectual capital, we've heard of financial capital, but here you got something now new, psychological capital. So that is a newfound ability that we all must embrace and grow. So let's define the first and foremost thing. It's like the elephant in the room now. What is mental agility? Well, the simplest of all definition, that this is coming from me, from the company itself, life, especially our work life, demands psychological capital to embrace agility amidst VUCA or AI. That's quite a statement because it encapsulates a lot of stuff in there. But before we even get into the meaning of this, right, let's understand something that we always often overlook. And I believe some of us have seen this in the past, this diagram. This is the picture of an iceberg. In an iceberg, you typically have the tip that's seen above water, that's about 10%, 15%, and the remaining 85 to 90% is below water. It's often unseen. Now, this is the story of our lives, right? Because what you see visibly, the outcome, the results that manifest in your life, it's actually just about 10 to 15%, meaning to say your potential is the remaining 85% that can be better. But unfortunately, for reasons that are quite obvious, these undercurrents are sabotaging our performance and results. And these undercurrents can come in the form of our awareness, our education system, the influences we get from media and friends, the upbringing itself, family, habits that are not so good, the attitude itself. So these are little things that are holding us back. And if we were to harness them to our advantage, then these undercurrents can propel us forward and derive the kind of outcome and result we want to see. Now, you may ask me a question, Sanath, how do I know that these things are helping me or not? How do I know whether my mental agility is good enough? Now, I have something for you, and I'd like you to now, perhaps if you have a piece of paper, a pen or paper, or maybe if you have a calculator or on the phone, we're going to do a little bit of an experiment, a quick experiment that will tell you where you stand. But in order for this experiment to work, you've got to be totally honest with yourself. And I'm going to ask you you can share your score if you like to, but I would like you to be totally honest with yourself. This is an important experiment to gauge where you stand in terms of your mental agility score. Mental agility score, right? That's what we're going to do now. We're going to compute your mental agility score. So let me take you one by one, right? So I'm going to flash a statement. If this statement is not you, you get a point. If it's you seem to relate to that, you get 0. But if it's sometimes yes, sometimes no, then you get a half point, right? So you're going to add up the scores, all right? So there's 9 statements altogether, and I'd like you to be totally honest with yourself. And I read the statement to you, I'll give you just probably 30 seconds. Note down your score because we want to add up all the scores, all right? Are we clear? Are we okay with that? Can I check on the chat? Are you clear with my instructions? So I'll be flashing the question one at a time. If you can relate to that, you agree to that totally, it's 1. If you do not agree with that totally, it's 0. If it's in between, sometimes, somewhat, then it's half. All right. So yes, I see a statement of the chat. Let's do the first one, right? The first statement is what we call as a halo effect. The halo effect is basically just nothing but the assumption that because someone is good at something or one thing, she or he will be good at other things. And this happened to me, you know. I was referred to a friend who once claimed that he or she knew an event organizer, and that event organizer did a good job for my friend. And because I knew my friend, I trusted him, and I said, okay, since this person did a good job for you, I'm very sure this person will do a good job for me as well. Unfortunately, it turned out to be a complete disaster. So in my case, my answer would have been 0, because I was a victim of halo effect, right? The assumption that because someone is good at doing one thing, he or she will be good at doing other things. Okay? That will be a 0 for me, right? Because I fell for it. So again, take note of your score, right? Are you good? You got the first one? Okay, brilliant. Excellent. So keep going, yeah? All right, so I hear some yeses, yeah? So I'm going to go next one now. So take note of your score. See, so if you got a 0 for the first one, just mark somewhere 0, right? And add up to the next one. Next one is availability heuristics. It means that because you think of something more frequently, you feel as if it's more likely to happen, right? So, you know, like sometimes you hear people saying, you know what, I think the guy is going to be sabotaging me, and I've been thinking about it for the last 1 week, and let's do something about it. But there's absolutely no evidence about it, but you just feel like it, and because you felt like it, you reacted, and you did what you did. So have you fell victim to this sort of thinking pattern sometimes? Because you thought about something more frequently, it's more likely to happen. Have you succumbed to this sort of thinking? Has it been, have you had sort of a situation like that? Because I certainly had. Okay, so take note of your score. If it's you, it's sometimes 0.5. If it's not you, it's 1. Okay. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one, right? Generalizations. The assumption that things are the way we see it. You know, I've got people saying, you know what, this Gen Z employees are very lazy. And it's an assumption that these people made because they just generalize the population, generalize the whole group. My God, Gen Z, huge millions of population, was just generalized as lazy because you had 1 or 2 examples observing Gen Z people being lazy, and you categorize the entire group as lazy. That's one example. Have you had that sort of experience sometimes? Okay, let's go to the 4th one. The illusion of understanding. The assumption that familiarity with something means you understand it. Now, just because you're reading about AI and you hear people talking about AI, it doesn't mean you know AI, right? There are a lot of people now who claim that they are experts in AI, but all they've done is to hear someone speak online, to just read a bit of articles, and then they claim to have understood AI. Have you had this sort of thinking pattern? Have you had that sort of thought process? That's called the illusion of understanding. Are you accumulating your scores so far? Right? You're gonna, before I move to the next screen, remember you're supposed to add on to your scores, right? If it's 1 or 0, it's 0.5, you keep adding on. Okay. We good? Can I move on to the next screen? To the 5th one now. All right, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, Elite. Thank you for the other person. Can't seem to get the name. Uh, Mintel. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for the feedback. So the fifth one is what I call as the hindsight bias. The tendency to view things as more predictable than they are. Meaning to say, for example, right? Someone says something like this. Well, everyone in the company to be involved in AI as that is the future of the company. We should get, there's a typo error there. We should get everyone in the company to be involved in AI as this is the future of the company. So the company may not be necessarily heading there right now, but they seem to feel that way, right? That's the hindsight bias. Have I done this sort of thing? Have I said something like this? Even to my children. Sometimes we do say things like that, right? And, it happens. Number 6, overconfidence bias, the belief that one's abilities are greater than they are. For example, someone might say, we have surveyed the market and we're doing like nobody else. We're the best. We have not had anyone else doing what we're doing. So, this overconfidence bias, have we all fall victim to this sort of thinking pattern? Have I said something like this in the past? So you know what you are. So accordingly, please allocate the score. Number 7, recency bias, giving more credibility to more recent data, the last presenter, the last candidate, the last answer. This happens very much, right, during interviews. For example, the interviewer may have interviewed 5 or 6 different persons, but it's the last person's perspective or view that probably stuck on to the interviewer, and that candidate may be seemingly given a better preference or choice in the selection process. So it is what we call as the recency bias, right? The one you remember the most recent, the last candidate, and so on. Have I had this sort of thing? Whether in my work, whether in my communication, whether in what I remember. So please award the score for yourself. Number 8, clustering illusion, seeing patterns that do not exist. Example, someone might say this, I notice customers prefer our competitors' app features more than ours. Wow, what was that basis for that? I mean, you just made the statement, but where is that? So people do make such statements, right? Sometimes in meetings you get bosses talk about this, you wonder where did this person come about with such ideas. So they make such blanket statements. So this is pattern, these are patterns that don't exist, they do not exist, right? So score yourself, and we're going to move on to the last statement before we compute your score. Okay, so let's do the last one. Solomon's paradox, the tendency to reason more wisely and objectively about others' conflict and dilemmas than our own. People are generally so good at helping others, but struggle to solve their own problems, right? We are experts at solving other people's problems, but never good in doing what we should be doing ourselves, right? So we are good preachers all the time. So do we do this? We talk about what others should do, but less of what we are doing or supposed to do ourselves. Okay, so that's Solomon's paradox. All right, so you got your scores, add up the ninth one, total up. So what I want you to do is come up with your score, right? It's just adding up your points, divide by 9 times 100. So that is your score. Now, some of you might ask me, Sanath, is there a passing mark for this? No, there isn't really a passing score, because these are not definitive, right? This is not fixed, but it gives you a gauge as to, wow, I didn't know such thing existed. We've been so used to doing things like this day in, day out, and you've probably heard people doing this sort of thing, and you thought probably it's normal, right? And this session And the very purpose of the session today that Kanchana and I are here together is to give you the awareness, right? Because to get into the details on how to address these problems may be a 2-3 days kind of workshop, which is beyond what we can possibly do today. But I believe this is what you need to know. Wow, this is so important. Never thought about this, right? That is what we want to achieve right now, right? To give you that awareness score. But be mindful that this is not an absolute score. There may be many other dimensions that may or may not have been included in this score. So it's not a definitive, it's not an exhaustive survey, but just to gauge where you probably stand right now, right? Just to qualify this survey. All right, so I'm not going to ask you your score, but if you wish to, you can put it down on the chat, but that's absolutely fine. All right, so let me move on to the next bit, right? So we are 2/3 of our session almost, and we in a few moments I'll be handing over the session to Kanchana, who's going to speak on a very interesting topic. But before that, let's define mental agility. Now, I have two definitions here, and you might be wondering why these two definitions are exactly the same. Now, remember, on the left, definition of mental agility. On the right, definition of mental agility at workplace. Remember, agility can be at home or it can even be at workplace. Now, regardless of where you are, it's an exact definition because you are one and the same person, whether you are at home or whether you're at work. But there's one keyword that I want to highlight. It's the capacity to respond, not react, respond. That's the keyword. And your ability to respond is a hallmark of your psychological capital, which we spoke about earlier. Now, let's talk about the big picture. Why on earth are we talking about mental agility? There is a correlation because the lack of mental agility over time can lead to fear, stress, anxiety, and if this is left untreated, keep going on, stress level going up, 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 this may lead to mental health issues, be it your diseases, be it frequently falling ill, breaking down. Remember, the system can only take so much. So what we are saying is, don't let it become a mental health issue. Address it here and now. And of course, there are loads of techniques, tools that are there. We are here to give you some of them, but they're much more than that. But just be aware of these things. And what does the WHO say, the World Health Organization? Can you imagine the number of people who are succumbing to mental health disorder on the rise? That's scary, scary statistics. So I'm just going to just 2 or 3 more slides before I hand it over to Kanchana. This very important term called mental cognitive load versus physical load. Now, we all know about physical load, right? It's your work, right? But what about your mental load? What's up there in your head, right? Your mental load is always going to be higher than your physical load, right? Because even if you have no work to do at work, you're still going to worry about what's happening at home, your family, your financial situation. If you've got a marriage crisis, is that problem? You've got a relationship problem, is that problem? You've got a boss problem, is that problem? You always have a higher mental cognitive load than your physical load. And which is why it's so important for us to not only look at what's apparent, what's physical, but what's going on up here in your head, right? Your mental cognitive load. This is what we want to manage, right? And this is where your psychological capital is all about, right? And that is important. So I want to just sum up this one slide, this definition of agility, right? Before I hand it over to Kanchana. I've got a nice definition, right? AGILITY. We've been talking about agility the whole time today. So what is A? The simplest definition. A is just nothing but awareness. Awareness of your discomfort. Now, Kanchana is going to talk about this in a moment. G is your guardrails. Remember, what you consume is going to be what's going to come out, right? So be careful about what you consume, what you put inside you. So your guardrails, your antivirus, you can call it, your internal antivirus. Is it good enough, strong enough? Introspect. Well, it does get in. If these things do get in, how do I introspect and rationalize it internally? That's introspect, right? L, letting go. I've got to have a way of channeling things out. If I keep expecting emotions, I keep getting in all these negative thoughts, emotions, and all that, what's going to happen to my internal state? So I must be able to let go. And that's a huge technique, which unfortunately, the two of us cannot do it today. Invest time for yourself. Give yourself the time that you need. It's so important. We give time for everybody else except for ourselves, right? Don't you think so? Yep, that is so important. And guess what? People do not know how to invest time in themselves. And I wish I had more time to talk about this a bit more, but so important. And transformation. Remember, we need to pivot in real time. We need to transform. We need to change. Because if I'm going to be what I've always done, I will get what I've always got. So I've got to transform. And lastly, but not least, it's a question of how I feel and respond, right? Because my emotions do not lie. And how I feel and respond is a cornerstone to what I have achieved internally in my mental state, in my psychological capital. On that note, I'd like to hand over the session to Kanchana, who will now be talking to about this topic of awareness.
Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can get you.
All right, great. Thank you, Dr. Sanath, for taking us through a journey to revisit certain ideas that we may have taken for granted for a long time. So sometimes there is a need to look into the mirror and probably adjust the mirror to set things right for the future. Now, what you see here on the slide is it introduces a simple but yet powerful awareness tool. Now, when we talk about resilience and mental agility, the starting point is recognizing what triggers us before we react. Now, the first cluster, as you can see, relates to time and the internal state. Past refers to prior experiences that shape how we respond today. Unresolved failures, criticisms, or past stress can quietly influence our reactions in similar situations. Present is the immediate context we are in right now. High workload, distractions, or sudden changes can heighten our sensitivity without us even realizing it. Probable reflects our expectations of what might happen. Now, when we anticipate negative outcomes, that anticipation itself can become a trigger. Physics reminds us that our physical state matters. Fatigue, hunger, lack of sleep, or illness significantly reduces our capacity to respond calmly. What about perspective? Perspective is the lens through which we interpret events. Now, a fixed or negative mindset can turn a temporary challenge into a perceived threat. Now, the second cluster we're going to look at relates to external systems or interactions. Let's start off with people. People are a major trigger point. Tone, behavior, or conflict with others often activates emotional responses quickly within us. Processes refer to workflows and ways of working. Now, when they are inefficient or unclear, frustration builds, and I'm sure we have all experienced it. Policies are the formal rules that govern behavior. Now, when people feel unfair, or sometimes we feel that the policies are rigid, they can trigger resistance or even disengagement. We can be totally disengaged and switched off. Procedures are the detailed how-to steps. Outdated or overly complex procedures can drain energy and even patience within us. And finally, practices refer to the unwritten rules and cultural norms within a setting. Now, these informal expectations often create pressure, and even when they are never explicitly stated. So, the key takeaway here is that resilience begins with awareness. When we can identify where our discomfort is coming from, we regain the choice in how we respond rather than react automatically. Now, the next slide, I would like to pause here and ask everyone an important question. When it comes to mental agility at the workplace, who do you think is responsible? Please take a moment and type your response in the chat if you can. Is it you as the individual who is responsible for your state of mental agility? Or is it the organization you work for? And when I say organization, I also mean the environment, whether it is an office or a hybrid setup, or even working from home with family or others around us. Now, of course, bear in mind there's no right or wrong answer here. The purpose is simply to reflect. Now, I hope you've given it some thought. Now, what we often see in practice is a shared responsibility, but not an equal one. Around 60% sits with the individual. This includes how we manage our perspective, our attitude, our ability to introspect, to establish personal guardrails, and sometimes even to let go of what no longer serves us. Now, these are internal capabilities and choices that shape our mental agility, even in difficult circumstances. The remaining 40% sits with the organization. Now, this is about the environment it creates through its culture, processes, policies, procedures, and even everyday practices. Now, these systemic elements can either support mental agility or quietly erode it. So, the key takeaway is that mental agility thrives when individual ownership meets supportive environment. One without the other rarely sustains resilience over time.
Thank you, Kanchana. And I believe that gave you an insight as to what A is. And I said, unfortunately, we don't have the time to go through the other component of the 7-step framework. But I believe this would have given you an insight of what are the awareness components that we have to keep in mind. And as Kanchana said very rightfully, that I, the individual, we hold the collective overall control of my mental state. And on that note, I like to conclude the session today and probably share some thought process. And we talked about the mental score, and we computed that mental agility score. And you have your score, you know where you stand, and we understood the definition of mental agility is my capacity to respond, be it at work or at home, and understanding that this cognitive load is always going to be higher than my physical load. And that's why it's so important for me to be very cognizant of the fact that there are many elements of discomfort that can rock my internal state of mind. And but because I'm now very conscious of it, I become a bit more in control of how I feel and react and my inner emotional state. So we briefly looked at the mental agility score, and that sort of summarizes the session today. But I'm getting back to the narrative again, right? So the tools and techniques now we talked about today was the score, was the agility formula, it was the 10 P's. These are the techniques and tools that we have given you, shared with you. And hopefully, if you use them over time, you can increase your perseverance and resilience. Now, we didn't talk about perseverance so much, but someone is able to persevere can keep going, right? Despite not seeing success. But even greater if you're resilient, because you may keep going, but when you see failures, you may stop. But someone's resilient to keep going despite failures. So what's next? What's next, right? That's a big question. What's next after this talk? Now, I would go on and say that this, right? We have given you an insight, courtesy of Agile Consultancy. What are some of the pillars of mental agility and psychological capital? And hopefully, these will give you the ability to now harness agility from the operational side, the emotional side, the learning side, the team side, the leadership aspect of it, the technology bit, the organizational bit, and the cultural bit. Now, these are, of course, beyond the scope of the session, but it's very important to understand them from the perspective of all these different dimensions. But let's not forget that what's underlying is my state of mental agility, which is important to address VUCA and AI. On that note, I would like to end the session, and I would like to take some questions, and I see 2 questions here already. Just checking with the organizers if I can take them now. Eluid?
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Sanath. This is now the moment for questions. I would like to call upon everyone that has questions. If you want to go on the mic, you can switch on your mic and speak. For those that would want to text their messages in their questions in the message section, you can go ahead as well, as you've already started. Dr. Sanath, you can go ahead for the question section.
Sure. So I'm reading the question now. I will try my best to answer them. Now, if I'm not clear, I will probably want to post the question back to the person who asked this question so I get the right question, right? So let's go with the first question from Chaima. Thank you for the question. How do you balance technology, AI, and the human factor to avoid over dependence? Okay, that's a very, very good question. And I think the first thing lies with the fact that whatever technology brings to us, these are just enablers, right? Now, how I respond to technology is more important, because very often what happens is we get into the reaction mode, and that causes fear, anxiety, and panic. So my answer to you, my quick answer to you is the balance lies within, right? Now the question is, I often see this happening quite a bit, because people get fearful and they get worried about it, because there's a lack of ability for them to internally pivot, learn, unlearn. Because you must have heard of this word, right? Learning, unlearning. It's very important in this age of AI. So can I do that? The lack of ability to do that is what we're talking about today, right? So doing that is so important so that I stay grounded. So hopefully that answers your question, Chaima. I think it's another one more question also. What advice would you give to young professionals to develop leadership in a VUCA world? So what I would say is this, right? Technology is going to be there. Uh, VUCA is just a term that says things are going to be volatile, going to be changing, it's going to be complicated, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. I mean, the rate of these things happening is going to go higher and higher. So the only thing I can do right now is to understand my ability to withstand this turbulence, and that's within, right? That's why we spoke about, as we're talking about the psychological capital, your resilience and perseverance. I'm going to just pause and check if Kanchana wants to add on at any point. No? How do you measure the impact of resilience initiatives on organizational performance? Now, that's a very big question. No, Haila, I wish I could answer that. Well, to keep it short and sweet, measuring resilience often involves certain baseline assessments. We have certain baseline surveys that we conduct to understand organizational level assessment. So, for example, in the work I do, I have something called Agile Maturity Assessment. And we do that as a service for organization to understand where they stand. And if the organization knows, they know where they stand, then it's easier for them to take proactive measures to move up the scale. But if they don't even know where they stand, then how can they even improve? So to answer your question, yes, there are certain measurements, metrics that we use to determine the level an organization is at. Zineb, a question from you. In an international context, what cultural differences affect the implementation of these techniques? I presume you're talking about, Zineb, the techniques that I've shared today, right? So the good news for you is that these are cultural agnostic. When I say agnostic, what I'm saying is that regardless of the culture, these are principles that apply throughout. So that is something that you lovely to know. But I also want to add there are certain cultural elements that may affect the implementation of these techniques in specific countries. Yes, that would be the case. But in terms of the broad principles, they remain quite universal. If that is helpful to you, Zineb, I hope that answered your question. Ismail, question you have is how do you integrate resilience into a company's culture in a sustainable way? You've asked a golden question, Ismail. So I wish I could answer that in a few words, but I try my best to do it. Now, how many of you have heard of this word transformation, right? Transformation, right? People talk about change, right? Change is a process that takes time. And a transformation process is not overnight. I know organizations have taken years, some months, some decades even to achieve that sort of change process. So the word you use is, I like the word you use, right? You use the word sustainable. How do you integrate resilience into the company's culture in a sustainable way? And I like that word sustainable because the sustainable means it is systematic, it is bringing in human elements, it brings in aspects of innovation and growth, it's people centric, there's empowerment, and there's buy-in. So I hope I'm not bringing too many dimensions here, because sustainable involves all these elements. And to put together these elements together may not always be that seamless. But it can be done, it has been done, and I personally overseen some projects like these, but it's not as seamless as we think it is. But at the same time, it's possible. Can I just check with Kanchana if there's anything that you would like to add on from what I've shared?
Yeah, just to add on, we must understand that mental agility is not a fixed trait. Organizations shape it through workload design, decision autonomy, feedback culture, and most importantly, psychological safety. So while individuals build capacity, environments determine whether that capacity can be sustained. So leaders play an important role across all sectors. They influence culture, they influence practices, and even systems. But they also model individual behavior, such as mindset, emotional regulation, and even reflection.
Thank you, Kanchana. That was amazing. And I think I hope we didn't inundate you with just too many of these jargons and terms. But essentially, I think the biggest take home message that Kanchana and I would like to highlight today is that be more cognizant, be more proactive, be more aware of what's happening inside you, because this is your investment. That's why we call it psychological capital. This investment will allow you to withstand the change that comes in VUCA and AI. And I like to leave you on that note with that few statements. And I just want to thank those who have asked those questions. Those are brilliant questions. And in fact, I was very, very surprised with the quality of questions that have come from all of you. And I'm truly very appreciative of those. Over to you, Lloyd.
Thank you very much. I do have a question on myself. The calculations that we did, was there an optimal number that one should look forward to having?
Okay. Well, 100% would be perfect, I guess. But again, like I said, it is not a question of, you know, optimal passing mark or excellent score. I've got an A plus. This survey is not meant for that purpose, right? It's a survey for us to just understand ourselves. Wow, I didn't think of this way. Because you know why? I've done sessions, I've done keynotes, I've done speeches in conferences, in talks, and so on. A lot of people think these things are taken for granted. Yeah, this is normal. I know this sort of stuff. This is this is nothing important. But when you do this sort of survey, people actually know that these are not things that you things you take for granted for, right? And a survey like this will give you that benchmark that yes, there's room for improvement, right? That's the intention, to understand that there is room for improvement. If I can just recognize that, the awareness of that, I think it's already a good step forward.
Thank you very much. With that, we've reached the end of our session, unless you have any other things to say. All right. That said, I would love to thank everyone that has attended this session, everyone that has come here and has joined us here today in this session with our presenters. And for those that are going to see our session online and published, we would also love to invite you to come and to come and join other sessions presented by Dr. Sukamaran. And also, yeah, with this, I would love to hand over the last words to Dr. Sukamaran to see if he has anything else to say, closing remarks. Yes.
Yeah, I would like to hand over the session to Kanchana, and I think she has always done a great job in providing the key takeaways, and I will probably want to do that again now. So over to you, Kanchana.
The key takeaway from this session is that in a world where change is constant and AI is inevitable, our greatest asset is not what we know, but how quickly we can adapt, unlearn, and grow. Because resilience isn't about just bouncing back, it's about bouncing forward with purpose, clarity, and mental agility. And that's what mental agility is all about. It's simply the willingness to revisit ideas, adapt quickly, and let go of the old, this is how we do things mindset. It's the ability to let go when plan A fails and the willingness to adapt quickly to put plan B into place. And that's what Dr. Sanath, when he shared the session, basically made us do that, seeing our own blind spots and adjusting our mirror accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanchana. I think that was a good summary of what we did today in a short.
All right. With that said, we come to the end of our session, and I would love not to forget to invite once more Dr. Sanath and also Dr. Kanchana to come and give us another session. For those that would love to join them, you would keep looking on our website for updates. Hopefully, we can have another session. I've discovered a lot about myself that I did not know, and I would love to go deeper in knowing more about other techniques that we can learn about. With this, I would love to say goodbye to everyone that has come here, and we'll continue being a thanking community. Au revoir.
Yeah. Just before we end, I'm not sure whether this is customary, but what I usually do in my sessions, if we have a nice photo session, we take at the end with everybody's camera on, and we can have a nice photo. If that's possible, I'm not sure. Does a platform allow this?
Yeah, it does. It does. I just hope I would invite everyone to switch on their cameras and see if we can have as many
That'll be
people.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can have your camera switched on, that'd be nice, because we can take. It's my first session in the group from Morocco, so I'm very excited today. Actually, we have never had any prior session with anyone from Morocco, so I thank Tamkin for this. Okay, we're still waiting for. They must be a bit shy, I guess, Eloise. I'm sorry to put you in a spot. If you're setting your hair and how you look and your background, maybe. Oh, it can't just be the two of us.
Yeah, I'm also shocked. But we
I'm sure
usually
that.
don't have, like you say, it's not customary that we
Yeah,
have people.
okay. It may not be customary. Yeah, it's not part of the culture, I guess, right? We just said. In the sessions
Yeah.
we do back in Malaysia and Kuala Lumpur, it's quite common, right? At the end, what we do, we get everybody to switch on the camera and we'll take a nice photo, and that gets posted to the social media and all of those.